Have you ever noticed how the smallest choices you make each day quietly shape your ability to handle life's toughest moments? That split-second decision to pause before reacting to bad news, or the way you reframe a setback as a lesson. These seemingly insignificant moments are the invisible threads weaving your resilience. The Stoics knew this better than anyone. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and philosopher, wrote extensively about what he called the power of the mind, the idea that our perception, not external events, determines our strength. And here's the surprising truth: resilience isn't just something you're born with or without. It's built, moment by moment, through 40 micro-decisions you make every single day, often without even realizing it. Think about the last time you faced a challenge. Did you instinctively blame circumstances, or did you ask yourself what you could control? That tiny shift in focus, Stoicism calls it the dichotomy of control, is one of those 40 hidden choices. It might seem small in the moment, but over time, these decisions stack up like bricks, either fortifying your inner strength or quietly chipping away at it. This video isn't about grand gestures or life-altering transformations. It's about the subtle, almost invisible habits of thought and action that the Stoics mastered centuries ago. Habits that can help you navigate chaos with calm, uncertainty with clarity, and pressure with poise. So what are these 40 micro-decisions? They range from how you greet the morning to how you process criticism, from the way you set boundaries to the stories you tell yourself about failure. Each one is a thread in the tapestry of resilience, and the best part, you're already making them. The question is whether they're working for you or against you. Over the next few minutes, we'll unpack these choices one by one, grounded in Stoic principles like discipline, perception, and the relentless focus on what's within your control. By the end, you'll see your daily routine in a whole new light, not as a series of random events, but as a training ground for unshakable resilience. Let's begin. How do you begin your day? That first moment when you open your eyes, do you reach for your phone, already bracing for the flood of notifications? Or do you take a breath and give yourself space to just be? The Stoics understood the power of this choice. Seneca, one of history's greatest Stoic thinkers, wrote that mornings were sacred, a time to ground yourself before the world's chaos could pull you in. He called it setting your mind in order, and it's no exaggeration to say this single habit can shape your entire capacity for resilience. Here's why: when you start the day reactively, jumping straight into emails or news, you're training your brain to operate in survival mode. Your nervous system stays on high alert, primed to see every minor inconvenience as a threat. But when you begin with a pause, even just 60 seconds to center yourself, you activate a different response. Epictetus put it perfectly: first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. That small gap between waking and acting is where resilience is born. It's the difference between being swept away by the current and choosing how you'll swim. Imagine two people facing the same stressful morning. One hits snooze 3 times, rushes out the door, and snaps at a coworker before their coffee's even cooled. The other wakes 5 minutes early, sits quietly to reflect, and writes down one thing they're grateful for. Both will encounter obstacles that day, but only one has given themselves the tools to respond with clarity rather than react with panic. This isn't about perfection, it's about priming your mind. Like a musician tuning their instrument before a concert, that morning pause ensures you're not playing life's symphony out of key. So here's a challenge. Tomorrow, before you check your phone or even get out of bed, ask yourself one Stoic question: what kind of day do I want to have? Not what kind of day you'll tolerate or endure, but what kind you'll consciously create. Because resilience isn't just how you handle crises, it's how you prepare for them in the quiet moments everyone else overlooks. Every resilient person has one thing in common: they know what's worth their energy and what isn't. The Stoics called this the dichotomy of control, and it's the foundation of unshakable resilience. Marcus Aurelius put it bluntly: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. In other words, resilience isn't about controlling the chaos around you. It's about mastering your response to it. Take a typical workday. Your coworker takes credit for your idea in a meeting. The project deadline gets moved up unexpectedly. The coffee machine breaks again. These aren't just minor annoyances, they're tests. The average person spends mental energy resenting the coworker, stressing about the deadline, or complaining about the coffee machine. But the resilient person asks one question: what here can I actually change? They focus on refining their idea for the next presentation, adjusting their schedule to meet the new deadline, or simply brewing a cup of tea instead. The frustration might still exist, but it doesn't control them. Here's the secret: every time you resist the urge to fixate on what's outside your control, you're not just avoiding wasted effort, you're training your brain to prioritize agency over helplessness. Think of it like building a muscle. The more you practice redirecting your attention to what you can influence, your effort, your attitude, your next move, the stronger your resilience becomes. And the opposite is just as true. Every minute spent obsessing over unfairness, randomness, or other people's actions weakens that muscle. So here's a challenge. Think of one thing that's been weighing on you lately, a situation where you felt stuck or frustrated. Now ask yourself, is this within my control? If the answer is no, imagine mentally placing it in a box labeled "Not my battle." It doesn't mean you ignore it or pretend it doesn't matter. It means you stop letting it drain your energy. Because resilience isn't about fighting every fire. It's about knowing which fires are worth your oxygen and which will burn out on their own. In the year 41, Seneca, the wealthy philosopher and advisor to Emperor Nero, was abruptly exiled to the rocky island of Corsica. The charge was adultery with the emperor's niece, a claim historians widely dismiss as political sabotage. Imagine that: one day you're among the most powerful minds in Rome, the next you're banished to a barren island with nothing but your thoughts. Most people would crumble under that kind of injustice, but Seneca, he wrote some of his most profound works there, later calling Exile the universe's way of giving me time to think. That's the Stoic mindset in action, not just enduring setbacks but mining them for hidden value. This is where resilience separates itself from mere survival. The average person sees an obstacle and thinks, "Why me?" The Stoic asks, "What can this teach me?" Marcus Aurelius put it bluntly: the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Every setback, whether it's a missed promotion, a broken relationship, or a failed project, carries the same choice. You can dwell on the unfairness, or you can ask, where's the leverage here? Take a modern example. Imagine you've spent months developing a new product, only for the launch to flop. The instinctive reaction: blame the market, the timing, or your team. But the resilient response, the Stoic response, is to dissect the failure without self-pity. Maybe the flop revealed a flaw in your understanding of customer needs. Maybe it forced you to streamline operations in ways that'll benefit future projects. That's not spin, it's strategic reframing. The obstacle didn't change, your perception of it did. Here's the micro-decision at play. Every time you face a setback, you have about 3 seconds before your brain assigns it a narrative. Will it be, "This ruins everything," or "This redirects everything"? That split-second choice is where resilience is built. Seneca's Exile could have been the end of his influence. Instead, it became the crucible for his greatest writings. Your last setback, that rejection, that mistake, that plan that fell apart, holds the same potential. The question isn't whether it hurt. The question is what you'll do with the lessons it carried in its hands. So try this. Think of a recent disappointment. Now imagine it's 10 years from today, and you're thanking your past self for that exact experience. What did it teach you? How did it steer you somewhere better? That's not wishful thinking. It's how resilient people transform stumbling blocks into stepping stones, because resilience isn't about avoiding falls. It's about learning the art of landing and realizing the ground has much to teach you. There's a hidden superpower in what you don't say. Picture this: someone cuts you off in traffic, or a colleague makes a snide remark in a meeting. Your jaw clenches, your pulse quickens, and the words are right there, ready to erupt. But here's where the Stoics would intervene. Epictetus, the former slave-turned-philosopher, had a simple rule. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. For the Stoics, silence wasn't just the absence of noise. It was a disciplined choice, a way to reclaim control over your emotions and reactions. Consider gossip, a habit so common we often don't even notice it. You're chatting with friends and someone mentions a mutual acquaintance's mistake. The details are juicy, the temptation to chime in is strong, but Stoicism asks, what do you gain? Temporary validation, a fleeting sense of superiority. Meanwhile, you've subtly trained your mind to focus on others' flaws rather than your own growth. Marcus Aurelius kept a private journal reminding himself, don't waste the rest of your time here worrying about other people unless it affects the common good. You'll lose track of your own work if you're always picturing what others are doing. The next time you feel that urge to speak impulsively, whether to vent, correct, or contribute to gossip, try this micro-decision. Pause for 3 breaths. In that space, ask yourself Epictetus' question. Is this necessary? Not is this true, or is this satisfying, but is this necessary? You'll be shocked how often the answer is no. And each time you choose silence over reaction, you're doing something profound. You're strengthening your inner citadel. Think of it like emotional weightlifting. Every time you resist the petty comment, the sarcastic jab, or the defensive outburst, you're building mental muscle. Over time, that muscle becomes resilience, the kind that lets you face real challenges without crumbling. Because here's the paradox: the people who speak least in moments of tension often hold the most power. Their words carry weight precisely because they aren't wasted on every passing emotion. So here's your challenge. For the next 24 hours, become an observer of your own speech. Notice how often you talk out of habit, insecurity, or the need to fill silence. And when you catch yourself, remember, silence isn't empty. It's the space where your strongest self grows. What if the simplest act could transform how you handle life's toughest moments? The Stoics believed gratitude wasn't just a polite gesture. It was armor against adversity. Marcus Aurelius began each morning with the same ritual, listing what he called the gifts of the gods. In his journal, basic things like his health, the ability to reason, even the sunlight streaming through his window. He wasn't just counting blessings, he was fortifying his mind, because here's the truth resilient people know: you can't feel victimized and grateful at the same time. Think about your own life for a second. What's one thing you take for granted right now? The device you're watching this on, the roof over your head. The fact that you woke up breathing without even trying. The Stoics called this the Dichotomy of Attention, where your focus determines whether ordinary things feel like entitlements or gifts. Seneca wrote letters reminding his friends that clean water and a safe bed were luxuries most of human history never knew. He wasn't shaming them, he was teaching them to see abundance where others saw lack. That shift in perspective isn't just optimism, it's strategic. Try this experiment tonight before sleep. Name 3 things that went right today, not grand achievements, mundane moments. The way your coffee tasted perfect this morning, the stranger who held the door open, the quiet minute you had between meetings. Why does this work? Neuroscience shows gratitude literally rewires your brain to scan for positives rather than threats. But the Stoics knew it centuries earlier. What you practice grows stronger. Every time you notice a small good, you're building neural pathways that'll help you spot opportunity in future crises. Imagine 2 people losing their jobs. One fixates on the injustice. The other, trained in gratitude, thinks, I still have my skills, my support network, and enough savings to pivot. Both face the same hardship, but only one has the mental tools to navigate it. That's why Marcus Aurelius called gratitude the joy of wanting what you already have. It's not about ignoring life's harshness, it's about balancing the scales so hardship doesn't outweigh hope. Here's your challenge. Tomorrow morning, before checking your phone or even getting out of bed, ask, what's one ordinary thing I'm grateful for today? Maybe it's the pillow under your head or the birds singing outside. Hold that thought for 10 seconds. Do this for 7 days and watch how it changes what you notice and how you respond when things don't go as planned. Because resilience isn't just how you withstand storms, it's remembering even storm clouds bring rain to parched earth. There's a secret space between what happens to you and how you respond, a fraction of a second where resilience is either won or lost. The Stoics called this the gap, and mastering it was their ultimate weapon against chaos. Epictetus, who endured slavery before becoming a philosopher, put it plainly, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. He wasn't just offering wisdom, he was revealing a psychological lifeline. That tiny pause between stimulus and response, that's where your power lies. Picture this, you're stuck in traffic, late for an important meeting. The car in front of you slams on its brakes for no apparent reason. Your body tenses, your hands grip the wheel, and the first words that come to mind aren't fit for polite company. This is the critical moment. Most people let the reaction roll right out, honking, cursing, stewing in frustration for miles. But the Stoic does something radical. They take 5 seconds. 5 seconds to breathe, 5 seconds to ask, will this anger move me forward? 5 seconds to remember that the traffic jam isn't the problem, their interpretation of it is. Ancient Stoics trained for these moments like athletes preparing for competition. They'd practice negative visualization, imagining worst-case scenarios, not to dwell on misery but to rehearse calm responses. Seneca would purposely wear ragged clothes or sleep on the floor to remind himself comfort wasn't guaranteed. Why? So when life inevitably disrupted his plans, he'd already strengthened his ability to pause before reacting. Modern science confirms this. That brief delay activates your prefrontal cortex, the brain's rational control center, instead of letting the amygdala, the panic button, run the show. Here's how to build this muscle. Next time someone cuts you off, your Wi-Fi crashes, or your child spills juice on your laptop, resist the immediate outburst. Count silently to 5. In that space, ask Epictetus' question, does this reaction serve me? You'll start noticing something extraordinary. Most knee-jerk responses, the sarcastic remark, the defeated sigh, the angry text, don't survive that pause. They shrink under scrutiny, revealing themselves as habits, not necessities. This isn't about suppressing emotions, it's about choosing their direction. Think of a river raging downstream, unstoppable until it hits a dam. That dam doesn't destroy the water, it redirects its energy. Your 5-second pause does the same for your reactions. The traffic jam still exists, the spilled juice still needs cleaning, but now you're responding from a place of agency, not reflex, and that's the alchemy of resilience, transforming raw reaction into purposeful action. Try this today. Pick one irritating moment, a long line, a rude comment, a broken appliance, and practice the pause. Don't judge yourself if the old reaction slips out at first. This is training, not perfection. Over time, you'll catch yourself sooner until that gap becomes wide enough to step through into the kind of calm that chaos can't shake. Growth lies outside comfort, a truth the Stoics didn't just preach but practiced with radical intention. Seneca, the philosopher who advised emperors, would deliberately wear thin clothing in winter or sleep on a hard bed, not out of masochism, but to remind himself, he who has not learned to endure small hardships will succumb to great ones. This wasn't theoretical, it was training, because resilience isn't built in the calm. It's forged in the moments you willingly step into discomfort before life forces you to. Consider how most of us live today, thermostats set to perfect temperatures, apps delivering food with a tap, entertainment endless and effortless. Convenience isn't the enemy, but when every discomfort is avoided, resilience atrophies. The Stoics knew this danger. They called it voluntary hardship, a small, deliberate acts of discomfort to prepare for life's inevitable storms. Marcus Aurelius would eat simple meals of stale bread to remember luxury wasn't owed to him. Epictetus, born into slavery, would walk barefoot in cold weather to harden his resolve. These weren't punishments, they were vaccinations against fragility. You don't need to sleep on the floor or fast for days to apply this. Start microscopic. Take a cold shower for the last 30 seconds. Skip your afternoon snack and sit with the hunger. Leave your phone behind on a walk. These tiny challenges rewire your relationship with discomfort, teaching your nervous system that temporary unease isn't an emergency. Modern research backs this. Voluntary exposure to mild stress, like cold therapy or intermittent fasting, boosts resilience by activating anti-inflammatory genes and strengthening emotional regulation. The Stoics were biomechanically ahead of their time. Here's why this works. When you choose discomfort, you flip the script on adversity. Instead of life happening to you, you become an active participant in your own growth. That's the difference between someone who crumbles under a delayed flight and someone who uses the time to read or reflect. Both feel the same frustration, but one has trained their mind to find opportunity in inconvenience. So here's your challenge today. Pick one mild discomfort to invite. Maybe it's working without your phone within reach for an hour. Maybe it's drinking your coffee black instead of sweetened. Notice the urge to avoid it, the voice that says, "Why bother?" and do it anyway. That moment of resistance is where resilience begins, because life will test you eventually. The question is whether you'll face it with the strength of someone who's practiced or the shock of someone who's never been uncomfortable. The Stoics chose practice. And that made all the difference. How do you end your day? Most of us collapse into bed exhausted, scrolling through our phones until our eyes droop shut, but the Stoics knew this was a wasted opportunity. Epictetus, the philosopher who turned adversity into wisdom, insisted his students end each day with what he called the evening audit, not just reflecting on what happened, but rigorously examining their choices. As you go to sleep, he wrote, ask yourself, what did I do well today? Where did I fall short? And what would the wisest version of myself have done differently? This wasn't about guilt or self-punishment. It was about turning each day into a masterclass in resilience. Think of it like an athlete reviewing game footage. The point isn't to dwell on mistakes, but to spot patterns, those subtle habits that either strengthen or undermine performance. Marcus Aurelius kept a journal for this exact purpose, filling pages with notes like, "I allowed myself to become irritated by trivial things today," or "I spoke more than I listened." Notice he didn't write, "Everything was terrible." He pinpointed specific moments where his actions strayed from his principles, then recalibrated. That's the key: reflection without rumination. One builds resilience, the other drains it. Here's how to try it tonight. Set aside just 5 minutes before bed, no screens, no distractions. Ask yourself 3 Stoic questions. First, what's one thing I handled well today? Maybe you paused before reacting to a provocation or chose gratitude over complaint. Celebrate that win, it's proof of growth. Second, where did I let my weaker self take the wheel? Be honest but kind. Did you waste energy worrying about something outside your control? Finally, if tomorrow brings a similar challenge, how could I meet it with more wisdom? This isn't about rewriting the past, it's about rehearsing for the future. Imagine 2 people ending their day. One mindlessly binge watches shows to numb the stress. The other spends 5 minutes reflecting, noticing they snapped at their partner over a trivial mess, then silently vows to choose patience tomorrow. Over time, that nightly practice compounds. The first person wakes up each morning carrying yesterday's unresolved tensions. The second starts fresh, armed with insights that turn stumbles into stepping stones. Tonight, before you sleep, try this experiment. Take 3 slow breaths, then ask epictetus questions. Don't overthink it, trust whatever arises. You might realize that what seemed like a bad day was actually a series of moments where you had more agency than you thought. And that's the gift of the evening review. It doesn't just help you process the day, it trains you to live the next one with eyes wide open. Complaining is like drinking salt water. The more you do it, the thirstier you become. Marcus Aurelius left us a striking example in his personal journals. Even as emperor, facing political betrayals and constant warfare, his writings never devolve into whining. Instead, you find lines like, "Today I shall meet interference, ingratitude, insolence, but I cannot be angry with my brothers, for we were born to work together." That shift from victimhood to responsibility is the essence of Stoic resilience. Every complaint you voice or entertain is a tiny surrender of your power to choose how you respond. Take a common workplace scenario. The printer jams right before your big presentation. Your colleague bails on a shared project last minute. The instinct. Gather coworkers and vent. "This always happens to me, but here's what resilience sounds like. The printer's down. I'll email the files to everyone and present from my laptop. As for my colleague, I'll handle what I can solo and flag the workload issue in our next team meeting." Both recognize the same problem, but one approach drains energy while the other redirects it. The Stoics called this prohesis, the discipline of focusing only on what's up to you. Neurologically, complaining reinforces negative neural pathways, literally training your brain to spot problems over solutions. Ancient philosophers didn't have fMRI scans, but they grasped this truth intuitively. Epictetus taught his students to treat complaints like fire. A small spark can burn down an entire forest if unchecked. Modern research confirms it. Chronic complainers show heightened activity in the amygdala, the brain's alarm center, while solution-focused thinkers strengthen prefrontal connectivity associated with emotional regulation. So here's the challenge. For the next 24 hours, treat complaints like a budget. You get 3, use them wisely. When a 4th frustration arises, pause and ask, "What's one actionable step I can take instead?" Maybe it's adjusting your own expectations, communicating a boundary, or simply accepting what you can't change. This isn't about toxic positivity, it's about reclaiming agency. As Marcus wrote, the impediment becomes the path. That jammed printer, it taught you to always have a digital backup, the flaky colleague, a chance to practice adaptability. By sunset, you'll notice something profound. The frustrations didn't disappear, but your relationship to them did. And that's the alchemy of resilience, transforming life's irritants into the grit that polishes your strength. Your mind is a fortress, but are you guarding the gates? The Stoics had a concept they called prosoch, vigilant attention to the impressions you allow to enter your awareness. Epictetus put it bluntly, the mind adapts and transforms to the nature of its habitual thoughts. Like a gardener carefully selecting which seeds to plant, resilience begins with consciously choosing what you feed your attention. Every headline you read, every conversation you linger on, every social media scroll, these aren't just passing moments. They're the raw materials shaping your inner world. Consider how most of us start our mornings, reaching for our phones, instantly flooding our brains with breaking news, comparison traps, and curated highlight reels of others' lives. The Stoics would call this mental pollution. Seneca warned his students about the crowd's madness, the way external chaos becomes internal chaos when we don't filter our inputs. Modern neuroscience confirms this. Constant exposure to negative news or social media envy triggers cortisol spikes, training your brain to scan for threats rather than opportunities. But here's the good news. Just as you can detox your body, you can detox your attention. Try this experiment for the next 7 days. Before opening any app or news source, ask Epictetus' question: is this essential to my growth or peace? If the answer isn't a resounding yes, skip it. Replace that morning scroll with 10 minutes of reading philosophy, journaling, or simply observing nature outside your window. Notice what happens. At first, you might feel withdrawal like a junkie missing their fix, but soon you'll notice quieter mental clarity, as if someone turned down the volume on the world's noise. That's not avoidance, it's curation. Think of two farmers. One lets every weed take root in their field, then exhausts themselves pulling them up. The other selectively plants only what they want to harvest. Both work hard, but only one enjoys abundant crops. Your attention works the same way. Every time you resist clicking on outrage bait or passively absorbing gossip, you're not being passive. You're actively cultivating mental soil where resilience can grow. Marcus Aurelius wrote his most profound insights not in reaction to external events, but in the quiet spaces he carved out between them. So here's your challenge. Tonight, audit your last 24 hours of mental inputs. How many served you? How many drained you? Then imagine your mind as a sanctuary. Would you let just anyone trample through it? The content you consume isn't just entertainment, it's the architecture of your resilience. Build wisely. Your body speaks to your mind long before your thoughts catch up. A truth the Stoics understood centuries before modern science confirmed it. Marcus Aurelius often wrote about standing like a rock against life's storms, but he wasn't just speaking metaphorically. He knew posture was philosophy in motion. The way you carry yourself physically shapes how you weather challenges mentally. Modern research reveals something remarkable. Adopting a confident stance for just 2 minutes lowers cortisol, the stress hormone, by 25% and boosts testosterone by 15%. The Stoics didn't have these numbers, but they grasped the principle. Resilience isn't just what you think, it's how you stand. Consider two people facing the same setback, a public speaking mishap or a critical feedback session. One slumps forward, shoulders rounded, gaze downcast. The other stands tall, feet grounded, chest open. Even if both feel identical nerves initially, their postures send wildly different signals to their brains. The first posture triggers a stress cascade, shallow breathing, racing thoughts, a sense of shrinking. The second activates what psychologists call power posing, signaling safety and control to the nervous system. Epictetus, who taught Stoicism while leaning on a crutch due to his lame leg, demonstrated this daily. His physical limitations never dictated his presence. Students described him as commanding without effort because he understood true strength comes from alignment, not anatomy. Try this practice right now wherever you are. Plant your feet firmly on the ground as if roots extend deep into the earth. Roll your shoulders back slightly, letting your chest open. Imagine a thread pulling gently upward from the crown of your head. Breathe into your belly for 4 slow counts. This isn't just good posture, it's Stoic posture, a physical declaration that you're ready to meet whatever comes without collapsing inward. Marcus called it the bearing of one who belongs to themselves. In other words, your body language isn't just communication to others. It's a memo to your own mind: we are not defeated. The next time you face a daunting task, a difficult conversation, a high-stakes meeting, pause for 30 seconds beforehand. Reset your stance. Notice how tension shifts when you stand like someone who trusts their own resilience. Because here's the secret: confidence isn't something you wait to feel. It's something you do first, and the feeling follows. The Stoics didn't just preach this idea, they embodied it. When Seneca faced exile or Epictetus endured slavery, their power came not from controlling circumstances, but from the unshakable way they occupied space within them. Your turn: stand like the rock, let the waves break around you. Pleasure whispers promises of immediate comfort, but virtue builds castles that last a lifetime. The Stoics drew a sharp line between these two forces, not because they rejected joy, but because they understood how easily fleeting pleasures could undermine enduring strength. Seneca, in his letters to Lucilius, put it plainly: true happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future, not to amuse ourselves with either hopes or fears, but to rest satisfied with what we have. That satisfaction isn't born from indulgence, it's forged through the quiet discipline of patience. Consider something as simple as your phone buzzing with a new message. That ping triggers a dopamine surge, your brain's way of craving instant connection. The reflex to check it is overwhelming because we've trained ourselves to equate immediacy with importance. But here's what Seneca would suggest: let it wait. Not because the message isn't valuable, but because you are. Every time you resist that immediate grab, you're doing something radical. You're reminding your nervous system that you, not external stimuli, dictate your attention. This is how small acts of patience become the scaffolding of resilience. History offers a striking example. When the Roman general Scipio Africanus prepared to face Hannibal's armies, he didn't rally his troops with promises of easy victory or immediate spoils. Instead, he subjected them to grueling marches with heavy packs, denying them comforts to strengthen their endurance. His logic: the more we sweat in peace, the less we bleed in war. The Stoics applied this same principle to daily life. By voluntarily delaying gratification, whether it's skipping dessert, resisting an impulsive purchase, or pausing before responding to provocation, you're not depriving yourself. You're training for moments when life demands endurance. Try this today. Identify one small pleasure you'd normally indulge without thought. Maybe that midday snack when you're not truly hungry, or the urge to scroll social media during a lull. Press pause for just 5 minutes. In that space, ask yourself Seneca's question: is this serving my long-term strength or merely pacifying a momentary itch? The first few times, it'll feel like holding your breath underwater, but with practice, you'll discover something extraordinary. The space between impulse and action is where your power lies. That's the Stoic secret: not the elimination of desire, but the mastery of it, because resilience isn't about what you can take, it's about what you can withstand. So here's your challenge. Before reaching for that next cup of coffee, that quick hit of entertainment, or that reflexive complaint, stop. Wait 60 seconds. In that minute, you'll find more than restraint. You'll find the quiet strength that turns ordinary moments into extraordinary discipline. And discipline, as the Stoics knew, is the unshakable foundation of resilience. Imagine waking up tomorrow to find your bank account emptied, your job gone, and your closest relationships strained. Most people would call this a nightmare scenario, but the Stoics called it practice. They developed an exercise known as Premeditatio Malorum, the premeditation of evils, not to dwell on darkness, but to disarm fear by staring it down in advance. Seneca put it best: he who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive. This isn't pessimism, it's psychological inoculation. By mentally rehearsing life's hardest blows, you strip them of their ability to shock you into paralysis. Take something as universal as public speaking anxiety. The average person avoids imagining their worst fear, forgetting their lines, facing silent stares, hearing muffled laughter. But the Stoic would actively visualize it, then ask, and then what? You stumble over your opening line, the room falls quiet, your palms sweat, but you breathe, you find your place, you continue, the world doesn't end. This mental rehearsal does something extraordinary. It transforms the unknown into the familiar. Neuroscientists call this stress exposure, a technique used to treat phobias. The Stoics were doing cognitive behavioral therapy 2,000 years before it had a name. Try this exercise right now. Pick one current worry, a looming deadline, a difficult conversation, a financial uncertainty. Close your eyes and vividly imagine the worst plausible outcome. Not fantastical disasters, but realistic hardships. Your project gets rejected. The conversation turns tense. The bill strains your budget. Now walk yourself through each step. How would you respond? What resources would you tap? Who could support you? This isn't about manifesting misery. It's about discovering your own resilience in advance. As Seneca wrote, the man who has practiced in advance the trials he might face will rise above those who have only grown comfortable in good fortune. Here's the paradox: by regularly visiting these mental depths, you rarely need to live there. Picture two sailors. One studies storm charts and practices emergency drills. The other avoids thinking about bad weather altogether. When the clouds gather, which one feels calmer? The Stoics understood that fear thrives in the gaps of our preparation. Fill those gaps with sober planning, and you're left not with dread, but with quiet confidence, the kind that says, "I've already survived this in my mind." Now let's handle it in reality. Tonight, before sleep, try this ancient exercise with one modern twist. After envisioning your worst-case scenario, ask, what's the best that could emerge from this? Maybe the failed project redirects you to a better path. Perhaps the tough conversation clears the air. Financial pressure sparks creative frugality. This dual-view practice, preparing for the worst while remaining open to hidden gifts, is the hallmark of Stoic resilience, because true strength isn't blind optimism or bleak pessimism. It's clear-eyed readiness forged in the quiet spaces between "what if" and "even so." There's a hidden lever inside your body that can flip the switch from panic to calm in seconds, and the Stoics discovered it over 2,000 years ago. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, taught his students that the breath was more than just oxygen. It was a direct line to the rational mind. When a storm of emotions hits, he'd remind them, master the breath first, and the mind will follow. This wasn't just philosophy, it was physiological genius. Modern science now confirms what the Stoics knew instinctively. The rhythm of your breathing directly influences your nervous system. Slow, deliberate breaths activate the parasympathetic response, dialing down stress hormones and dialing up clarity. Resilience, it turns out, isn't just a mindset. It's a rhythm. Consider how most people react to stress: shallow chest breaths, quickened pulse, a sense of spiraling. Now imagine Epictetus watching this scene. The philosopher who famously said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do," would spot the missed opportunity instantly. Before you can choose your response, you must reclaim your baseline, and that starts with something as simple as exhaling. He taught that mastery begins with the smallest disciplines. If you want to move a mountain, first learn to move a pebble. Controlled breathing is that pebble, a micro moment of agency that shifts everything. Here's how to put this into practice today with the 4-7-8 technique, a modern method that echoes Stoic principles. Inhale quietly through your nose for 4 seconds, filling your belly like a balloon. Hold that breath for 7, feeling the stillness. Then exhale slowly through your mouth for 8, as if you're deflating tension itself. Repeat this cycle just 3 times. Why does this work? The extended exhale triggers a cascade of calming signals, overriding the fight or flight response. It's not magic, it's mechanics. The Stoics didn't have the term vagus nerve stimulation, but they recognized the power of breath to loosen the grip of agitation, as Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journals. Picture 2 people stuck in the same traffic jam. One white-knuckles the wheel, muttering about lateness. The other does 4-7-8 breathing under their breath. Both face identical delays, but only one emerges centered enough to problem solve. Maybe calling ahead to reschedule or using the time to listen to an uplifting podcast. That's the resilience gap, bridged by something as elemental as air. Try this now before you even need it. Sit upright, feet flat, hands relaxed. Cycle through 4-7-8 breathing 3 times. Notice how your shoulders drop, your thoughts clarify. Bookmark this feeling, because the next time stress strikes, a tense meeting, a difficult conversation, you won't be starting from scratch. You'll have a Stoic anchor ready to deploy in the space between stimulus and response. As Zeno would say, the door to wisdom swings on small hinges. Your breath is that hinge, and with each deliberate cycle you're walking through. Marcus Aurelius often climbed the steps of his mind to a vantage point few visit, what he called the view from above. Lying awake at night on military campaigns, the Roman emperor would imagine watching Earth from the stars, seeing cities as mere dots and human conflicts as fleeting sparks in the dark. Think of the substance of the whole, he wrote, and how small your share. Think of the span of time and the brief instant assigned to you. This wasn't escapism, it was emotional alchemy. By mentally zooming out, he transformed daily irritations into cosmic grains of sand, too insignificant to steal his peace. Consider how differently we experience traffic when staring at the bumper ahead versus glancing at the skyline. One view magnifies frustration, the other reveals context. That's the Stoic secret. Resilience grows not by fighting petty concerns, but by outscaling them. When a colleague takes credit for your idea or a stranger cuts in line, try this exercise. Picture yourself rising until the office becomes a Lego block, the grocery store a dollhouse. From that height, grievances lose their grip. As Marcus noted, many of the anxieties that harass you are unimportant. You have them only because you haven't taken this wider view. History offers a striking example. When Thomas More sat in the Tower of London awaiting execution, he didn't dwell on the injustice. Instead, he wrote letters describing how the stars kept him company through his cell window, a literal view from above that anchored him in eternity while kings and courts played their temporary games. The Stoics would nod in recognition. Epictetus taught that most suffering comes from confusing what's mine with what isn't. Zooming out clarifies that distinction. Your reputation, temporary, others' opinions, fleeting, the core of your character. That's the mountain that remains when the weather passes. Tonight, step outside and look up. Not with a quick glance we give the night sky between scrolling sessions, but with full attention. Trace the constellations our ancestors navigated by. Remember that the light hitting your eyes left those stars years, sometimes centuries ago. Then ask Marcus' question, what in my life seems smaller from here? That argument with your neighbor, the missed promotion, the scratch on your car, none vanish but they settle into their true proportions. This practice isn't about dismissing real pain, it's about preventing small things from casting large shadows. The cosmos has humbled thinkers for millennia. Carl Sagan's pale blue dot speech echoed Marcus when he described Earth as a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. Yet this perspective isn't meant to diminish us, it's meant to free us. When you grasp how briefly your 90 years flicker against 13.8 billion years of cosmic time, two paths emerge. You can despair at your smallness, or you can revel in the miracle that you get to exist at all. The Stoics chose the latter. Their resilience came not from denying life's struggles, but from seeing them against a backdrop so vast they became brushstrokes in a grander painting. So when trivialities threaten to consume you, remember, you're always one mental step away from the stars. Take it, breathe the thin air of perspective. And carry that clarity back down to earth, where it turns storms into showers and molehills back into what they always were. Epictetus once told his students, some things are in our control while others are not. He wasn't just talking about external events, he was pointing to a deeper truth about our own expectations. The moment you demand perfection from yourself, from others, or from life itself, you hand over your peace to an impossible standard. Resilience doesn't come from flawless execution. It grows in the soil of self-acceptance, where good enough is not surrender but strategy. Consider how nature operates. Seneca observed that even the grandest oak tree has gnarled branches, that rivers meander unpredictably, and that mountains crumble at their edges. The world is beautiful, he wrote, not because it is perfect, but because it is alive. Yet when it comes to our own lives, we often reject this wisdom. The presentation must be memorized word for word. The home must look like a magazine spread. The children must excel in every activity. These invisible contracts we make with ourselves aren't just exhausting, they're antithetical to the Stoic art of resilience. Every unmet perfectionist demand becomes a tiny fracture in your foundation, until one day, an ordinary setback shatters you. Think about the last time you procrastinated on a project because you were waiting for ideal conditions. Or the meal you didn't share because the table setting wasn't Instagram-worthy. These aren't just small hesitations, they're stolen moments where life could have been lived fully. The Stoics practiced what modern psychologists call satisficing, the deliberate choice to aim for adequacy rather than unattainable excellence. When Marcus Aurelius led Rome through plague and war, his journal reveals no lament about imperfect outcomes, only reflections on whether he'd done his best with the tools at hand. Here's a challenge. Pick one area where you've been demanding perfection, maybe your fitness routine, your parenting, or your side hustle. For the next week, consciously lower the bar to good enough. Work out for 20 minutes instead of an hour. Serve a simple meal without apology. Send that email with 2 typos. Notice what happens. At first, you'll feel discomfort, the itch of unfinished business. But soon, you'll discover something liberating. The world doesn't end when you release the impossible standard. In fact, you might find more energy for what truly matters. Because here's the paradox the Stoics uncovered. Embracing imperfection doesn't weaken you, it frees you to show up consistently. The musician who practices daily with wrong notes improves faster than the one who waits for flawless inspiration. The writer who publishes a messy first draft grows while the perfectionist stares at a blank page. Resilience isn't the absence of stumbles, it's the willingness to keep walking with scraped knees. So ask yourself tonight, where have you been confusing excellence with exhaustion? And what might become possible if you settled for good enough, long enough to build real strength? There's a leather wristband some Stoics wore with a single Latin phrase etched into it. Memento Mori, remember you must die. Far from being morbid, this practice was their ultimate clarifier. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." The Stoics weren't fixated on death. They were obsessed with life specifically, with not wasting a moment of it. Mortality meditation wasn't about fear, it was about focus. When you truly grasp that your time is finite, the trivial falls away, and what remains is startlingly clear. Think of how differently you'd approach today if you knew it was your last. Would you spend it refreshing your inbox, arguing over politics online? Or would you call the person you love most, step outside to feel the sun, or finally write that letter you've been putting off? This isn't hypothetical. The Roman general Lucius Sulla kept a skull on his desk as a paperweight, not as a dark obsession, but as a daily reset button for his priorities. Every decision, every interaction was filtered through one question. Does this deserve a piece of my limited time? Here's how to bring this into your modern life without a skull on your desk. Try the wristband exercise. Each morning, slip on a simple band, a watch, a hair tie, anything you'll notice, and let it serve as your Memento Mori trigger. Every time you glance at it, ask, is what I'm doing right now worthy of my life? Not in a grand existential sense, but in the small choices. That meeting where you're half listening, would you stay if today was it? The grudges you rehearse in your mind, would they matter in your final hours? The Stoics called this living with death as an advisor, and its power lies in its immediacy. Consider two people starting their day. One stumbles through the routine, distracted by notifications and petty worries. The other, wearing their wristband, pauses when they see it and thinks, if this were my last Tuesday, would I spend it like this? The answer might not change their entire schedule, but it shifts how they inhabit it. That boring commute becomes a chance to finally listen to that album you love. The lunch break turns into a real break, no screens, just savoring each bite. Even frustrations soften when viewed through the lens of, is this worth my precious breath? Marcus Aurelius wrote, think of yourself as dead. You have lived your life. Now take what's left and live it properly. This isn't about dramatic bucket list living. It's about infusing the ordinary with intention. The parent who knows time is limited doesn't just rush through bedtime stories. They feel their child's weight in their lap, hear the cadence of their own voice reading, and let the dishes wait. The artist who remembers mortality doesn't wait for inspiration. They show up and create. Even if the result isn't perfect, tonight try this. Place your phone in another room. Sit quietly and for just 60 seconds, let the thought sink in. One day this will be over. Notice what surfaces, not fears but longings. The conversation you've avoided, the project you've delayed, the forgiveness you've withheld. Then tomorrow, wear your wristband. Let it nudge you back to what Marcus called the straight edge, the unbroken line of a life lived awake, because the secret of Memento Mori isn't that it makes life shorter. It makes it deeper. Every moment becomes a choice, and choices made with eyes open are the ones that build resilience when the storm finally comes. Epictetus compared his philosophy school to a hospital, a place where students didn't come to hear pretty speeches, but to heal their minds. You enter here as someone lame in spirit, he'd say, and you leave walking upright. But here's the twist the Stoics understood: healing doesn't always look serious. Sometimes it looks like laughter. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who faced rebellions and plagues, wrote in his private journal, "When circumstances threaten to pull you under, picture the gods looking down and laughing not at you, but with you, at the absurdity of it all." That's the secret weapon most miss. Resilience isn't just about bearing hardship, it's about disarming it with a grin. Take something as universal as a traffic jam. Most people white-knuckle the wheel, muttering about wasted time, but the Stoic sees a different scene, a chance to practice what Seneca called the pause. You're not stuck, you've been gifted an unexpected intermission. Listen to that podcast you've saved, call an old friend, or here's the radical option: sit quietly and chuckle at the cosmic joke. All these cars, all these people racing nowhere, engines idling while tempers rise. The universe just handed you a masterclass in patience, wrapped in irony. As Marcus wrote, the obstacle becomes the way, not when you grimace through it, but when you recognize its teaching hidden in plain sight. History offers a striking example. When the philosopher Diogenes was captured by pirates and sold into slavery, he didn't despair. According to ancient accounts, he looked at his chains and joked, "How amusing! A man who lives in a barrel now has his own personal valet." His captors were so disarmed by his humor that they reportedly treated him with deference. This wasn't denial, it was alchemy. By reframing his suffering as satire, Diogenes robbed it of its power to humiliate him. The Stoics took note: what you can laugh at, you can conquer. So here's your challenge. Think of one frustration gnawing at you right now: a delayed flight, a broken appliance, a petty workplace drama. Now imagine explaining this problem to your future self 10 years from now. How small might it seem? How might you shake your head at how seriously you took it? That's the space where resilience grows, not in the absence of annoyance, but in the ability to meet it with a smirk. Because adversity, like a bully, loses its grip when you stop reacting with fear and start responding with amusement. Tonight, try this exercise. Recall a past struggle that once felt overwhelming but now seems trivial, maybe a failed relationship, a lost job, a public embarrassment. Notice how time has turned it from a wound into a story, maybe even one you tell with laughter. Now apply that lens to today's irritations. What current frustration might someday become your favorite anecdote? The Stoics knew this truth long before modern psychology confirmed it. Humor doesn't minimize pain, it puts it in perspective. And perspective, more than grit alone, is the unshakable foundation of resilience. Seneca called time the one currency you can spend but never earn back, a stark reminder that how you wait matters as much as what you achieve. Most people see patience as passive endurance, but the Stoics framed it as active cultivation. When you say "not yet" instead of "never," you're not delaying progress, you're planting seeds in the fertile soil of persistence. Epictetus captured this perfectly. No great thing is created suddenly, any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig. If you tell me that you desire a fig, I answer that there must be time. Let it first blossom, then bear fruit, then ripen. Resilience isn't forged in the moment of harvest, but in the daily discipline of tending the vine. Take learning a language, a skill that humbles even the most determined. The beginner who expects fluency in 3 months will quit in frustration, but the one who embraces "not yet" celebrates stumbling through their first conversation, knowing each mispronounced word is a stepping stone. Marcus Aurelius compared this to a blade of iron. If you neglect to sharpen it, the dullness becomes its nature. Every small effort is a stroke of the whetstone, invisible in the moment but transformative over time. The "not yet" mindset isn't about lowering standards. It's about honoring the process that makes high standards attainable. History offers a striking case study in Thomas Edison's famous reply when asked about his 10,000 failed attempts to invent the light bulb. "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." That stoic patience in action, reframing setbacks as data points on a longer timeline. Seneca would nod in approval. In his letters, he described life as a play where we don't control the script, only how we perform our role. The actor who stumbles over a line doesn't walk off stage. They recalibrate and continue, trusting the next act will be stronger. Here's how to apply this today. Pick one skill or habit you've abandoned because progress felt slow. Maybe playing guitar, meditation, or public speaking. Re-engage with it, but this time track tiny victories. The chord that rings clearer today than last week. The extra 30 seconds you sat in stillness. The tremor in your voice that's slightly less pronounced. These aren't just milestones, they're proof that not yet is a temporary state, not a life sentence. Ask yourself tonight, what's worth the quiet, unglamorous work of becoming? Not what will impress others, but what will fortify you, because resilience doesn't shout about its growth. It whispers in the language of daily, showing up the practiced scales before the symphony, the drafts before the masterpiece, the stumbling steps before the dance. The Stoics knew the person content to move slowly but surely will always outlast the one sprinting toward mirages of instant perfection. Your not yet is the birthplace of your I can. The Stoics didn't just train their minds, they conditioned their bodies with the same discipline. Musonius Rufus, often called the Roman Socrates, put it bluntly, how can a mind stay sound if the body that carries it is neglected? This wasn't about vanity or athleticism, it was about functional resilience. When your muscles are weak, your posture slumps under life's weight. When your breath is shallow, stress floods your system unchecked. The Stoics saw physical movement as mental armor, a way to prepare the body so the mind could remain unshaken when challenges came. Consider how you feel after sitting for hours versus taking even a short walk. One leaves you sluggish, your thoughts murky. The other clears mental fog like wind sweeping through a stuffy room. Modern science confirms this ancient insight. Exercise boosts brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a protein that enhances neural plasticity, literally making your brain more adaptable to stress. But you don't need a gym membership or marathon training to harness this. The Stoics practiced something far simpler: daily, intentional movement. Rufus insisted even philosophers should dig a little, plant a little, not to become farmers, but to remind themselves that vigor isn't optional. Here's a 5-minute Stoic stretch routine you can do anywhere. Start by standing tall, feet shoulder-width apart. Reach your arms skyward, imagining you're lifting a weight off your shoulders. Marcus Aurelius, Rocks of Worry. Hold for 3 breaths, feeling your spine lengthen. Then fold forward gently, letting your head and arms hang loose, like a tree bending in the wind without breaking. Next, roll up slowly, vertebra by vertebra, as if reconstructing your resilience piece by piece. Finish by rotating your shoulders in broad circles, epictetus metaphor for carrying burdens lightly. This isn't just physical maintenance, it's kinetic philosophy. The deeper truth, how you treat your body is how you treat your life. Skip movement and you're rehearsing avoidance. Honor it and you're practicing commitment. When Nero ordered Seneca to commit suicide, the elderly philosopher didn't crumble. Years of cold swims in the Tiber River and ascetic living had steeled him to face even death with steady hands. That's the ultimate lesson. Resilience isn't just thought, it's embodied. Your muscles remember ease under pressure. Your lungs learn calm in chaos. So ask yourself today, not, how can I punish my body into shape? But how can I honor this vessel that carries my mind through storms? Maybe it's taking the stairs instead of the elevator, or stretching while your coffee brews. Small actions compound. Every time you choose motion over stagnation, you're not just building strength, you're rehearsing the art of showing up, breath by breath, for whatever life brings next. The next time you're about to click buy now on that flashy gadget or trendy outfit, imagine Epictetus standing over your shoulder asking, "Is this a want or a need?" The Stoics practiced something radical for their time and even more radical for ours: intentional minimalism. Not deprivation, but discernment. Epictetus, who lived with just a wooden bowl until he saw a child drinking from cupped hands and threw even that away, wrote, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." This wasn't about poverty, it was about power, the freedom that comes when you're no longer tethered to the next purchase. Think about your last impulse buy. Maybe it was the third coffee of the week you didn't really enjoy, the novelty kitchen gadget now collecting dust, or the subscription service you forgot you had. These small leaks in your wallet are more than financial, they're psychological. Every time you bypass that pause between desire and purchase, you're training your brain to seek instant gratification rather than enduring satisfaction. The Stoics called this ascesis, the deliberate practice of resisting trivial pleasures to strengthen your capacity for meaningful restraint. Take the ancient story of Crates, who tossed his fortune into the sea after realizing his wealth demanded more from him than he from it. Modern life offers less dramatic but equally telling moments. That email with "limited time offer" in the subject line, the social media ad perfectly targeted to your insecurities. The mall display engineered to trigger just one more mentality. Each of these is a test. Will you let external triggers dictate your internal state, or will you insert what the Stoics called prosoch, vigilant awareness between impulse and action? Here's how to practice the pause today. When temptation strikes, whether it's a sale notification or a coworker's new gadget inspiring envy, stop for 60 seconds. Ask Epictetus 3 questions. Will this make me more virtuous? Will I regret this purchase in a month? What deeper need is this trying to fill? You'll discover most impulse buys are emotional band-aids, attempts to soothe boredom, insecurity, or fatigue with temporary dopamine hits. The Stoic alternative: redirect that energy towards something that truly nourishes. A walk instead of an online cart, a book instead of a binge, a conversation instead of consumption. Tonight, try this experiment. Open your closet or pantry and pick one item you bought impulsively but rarely use. Hold it and ask, what did I really hope this would give me? Status comfort, the illusion of progress. Then imagine your life without it. That's the space where resilience grows, not in accumulating armor, but in realizing how light you can travel when you carry only what matters. Because every no to a non-essential is a yes to something far greater, your sovereignty over your own desires. Marcus Aurelius once scribbled a note to himself that might change how you approach every potential argument. Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary? The emperor who ruled Rome through wars and plagues wasn't advocating passivity, he was teaching strategic discernment. Resilience isn't measured by how many battles you fight, but by how wisely you choose which ones are worth your energy. Every time you walk away from a pointless dispute, you're not surrendering, you're conserving inner resources for the conflicts that truly matter. Consider Seneca's blunt math on anger. For every minute you remain angry, you give up 60 seconds of peace. Picture two neighbors feuding over a tree branch hanging slightly over a property line. One spends weekends composing furious letters and measuring inches. The other shrugs, trims the branch when it's convenient, and enjoys their coffee in the shade. Both face the same circumstance, but only one has grasped the Stoic secret. Peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the conscious filtering of what deserves your attention. Take a modern family dinner where politics erupts. The instinct is to correct your uncle's misinformation point by point, armed with facts and righteous frustration. But the Stoic pauses. They ask Marcus' question, is this necessary? Will changing his mind tonight improve anyone's life? Or is this just an exercise in ego? The resilient person knows some truths aren't worth the toll they take on relationships. They might redirect the conversation with humor or say simply, let's agree to enjoy the meal. This isn't weakness, it's the strength of someone who chooses their battles like a general planning a campaign. History offers a telling example. When the Roman general Cato was repeatedly heckled in the Senate, his opponents expected outrage. Instead, he kept reading his scroll unfazed. Later, when asked why he didn't retaliate, he replied, "It's more shameful to insult than to bear insult." The Stoics admired this not because they encouraged being doormats, but because they recognized an ironclad truth. When you refuse to engage in petty skirmishes, you reveal how little power others truly have over your peace. So here's your challenge today. Think of a recent disagreement, maybe a social media spat or a workplace tension. Play it back like a film reel, but this time insert Marcus' filter. Was this necessary? Not was I right, but did this exchange serve anything beyond momentary victory? You'll start noticing something liberating. Most arguments are optional. The coworker who takes credit for your idea, their character is their own punishment. The stranger's rude comment, a passing cloud. The family member who never listens. A chance to practice patience rather than persuasion. The Stoics didn't avoid all conflict, they waded into battles for justice without hesitation. But they measured the cost of every skirmish against their most precious resource, the undisturbed mind. As Epictetus put it, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. Tonight, when some small annoyance tempts you to react, ask not just, am I right? But is this where I want to spend my resilience? Because every no to a trivial fight is a yes to preserving strength for the ones that truly shape your life. Life rarely fits into neat categories of good or bad, success or failure, yet that's exactly how most of us instinctively frame it. The Stoics rejected this black and white thinking with a radical alternative, the both and perspective. Epictetus captured it perfectly when he said, "Every situation has two handles, one by which it can be carried and one by which it cannot. What looks like a disaster might also be an opportunity. What feels like rejection might simultaneously be redirection." This mental flexibility isn't just philosophical wordplay. It's the secret to dissolving frustration before it takes root. Consider a modern work-life balance struggle. The exhausted parent berates themselves. "I'm failing at my job because I leave early for my kids' games." The Stoic reframes, "I'm prioritizing family and finding creative ways to excel professionally." That tiny shift from either or to both and changes everything. Suddenly, you're not trapped between impossible choices. You're navigating a nuanced reality where multiple truths coexist. Marcus Aurelius demonstrated this during wartime, writing in his journal, "Today I will meet interference, ingratitude, and arrogance, but also loyalty, unexpected kindness, and moments of grace." He didn't deny the hardships, he simply refused to let them eclipse the whole picture. History offers a striking example in Zeno, the founder of Stoicism. After losing his entire fortune in a shipwreck, he didn't declare life unfair. Instead, he famously said, "Fortune has done me a great favor. She's relieved me of the burden of wealth." This wasn't denial or toxic positivity. It was a genuine recognition that loss and liberation could exist simultaneously. Modern psychology confirms this wisdom. Cognitive flexibility, the ability to hold multiple perspectives, is a hallmark of emotional resilience. People who see setbacks as both painful and instructive recover faster than those stuck in rigid, all-bad narratives. Try this exercise today. Think of a current frustration, maybe a project that's behind schedule or a relationship tension. Now ask, what two seemingly opposite truths exist here? The delayed project might be stressful and revealing where your team needs better systems. The strained relationship might hurt and be clarifying your boundaries. Epictetus called this seeing the fuller truth, not to minimize difficulty, but to expand your capacity to navigate it. Where in your life are you ignoring nuance? The coworker who's difficult but also deeply knowledgeable. The rainy vacation that ruined your plans but created unexpected coziness. Even the Stoics themselves embodied both and. They were ruthlessly practical and profoundly spiritual, unflinchingly disciplined and deeply compassionate. Resilience lies in these paradoxes, in the willingness to say, this is hard and I'm growing, I'm disappointed and I'll adapt. Because when you stop demanding that life fit into tidy boxes, you discover something extraordinary. The messiness itself becomes your strength. The laundry piles up, the inbox overflows, the commute drags. What if these weren't chores to resent, but proofs of privilege to reclaim? The Stoics mastered this mental pivot with what Marcus Aurelius called the art of alchemy, transforming duty into dignity with three simple words: I get to. Not I have to wash dishes, but I get to nourish my family. Not I have to work late, but I get to contribute my skills. This subtle shift isn't just positive thinking, it's a radical reclamation of agency. As Marcus scribbled in his wartime journal, what stands in the way becomes the way, not by changing the obstacle, but by changing your stance toward it. Consider water. To a fish, it's invisible, just the medium it swims through, but to a desert wanderer, it's a miracle. The Stoics argue most of life's have-tos are like that fish's water, invisible privileges we've stopped seeing. Epictetus, born into slavery, understood this deeply. He taught that carrying heavy buckets wasn't just labor, it was strength training for the soul. Discomfort is the price of admission to a meaningful life, he'd say. Modern psychology confirms this. People who reframe obligations as opportunities show higher resilience markers, from lower cortisol levels to greater life satisfaction. Take a mundane example: grocery shopping. The exhausted parent sees it as a time suck between tantrums and checkout lines, but apply the Stoic lens. I get to choose nourishing food for my family, a luxury my great-grandparents couldn't imagine. Suddenly, the fluorescent lit aisles become a gallery of modern miracles: fresh fruit in winter, spices from continents away, payment with a phone tap. Marcus called this seeing with new eyes, a practice he used to endure the drudgery of imperial duties. When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. Here's the twist: this reframe isn't about denying hardship. It's about discerning between legitimate struggle and ungrounded complaint. The single parent working 3 jobs isn't being asked to romanticize exhaustion. But the person grumbling about folding laundry while watching Netflix, that's where the Stoic question bites. Would you rather live in an era where children hauled water from wells and clothes were beaten on rocks? Privilege awareness doesn't shame discomfort, it contextualizes it. Tonight, try this experiment. Pick one recurring annoyance, maybe taking out the trash or attending that weekly meeting. Recast it as I get to live in a place with waste management systems. I get to collaborate with colleagues who rely on my input. Notice what happens. The task doesn't change, but your relationship to it does. That's the Stoic secret. Resilience isn't built by avoiding life's weights, but by recognizing they're the very things that strengthen your grip. So ask yourself, what have-to will you reclaim as a get-to today? The answer might just reveal how much you've been taking for granted, and how much power was there all along. Epictetus compared the mind to a ship's rudder. Tiny adjustments early on prevent massive corrections later. You don't wait for the storm to steer, he'd say. You correct course with each ripple. This is the essence of the 10-second rule, not some rigid self-punishment, but the art of catching yourself mid-slip before small choices become big consequences. Seneca captured it perfectly. Errors, like straws, float on the surface. The wise man dives beneath and sweeps them away before they tangle. Take something as universal as diet habits. You reach for a second dessert, fully aware it doesn't align with your goals. The average person thinks, I've already blown it, might as well finish the whole cake. But the Stoic pauses in that 10-second window between bite and regret. They don't berate themselves, they simply put the fork down. That tiny intervention, barely a blip in time, changes the entire trajectory of the evening. No dramatic vows, no self-flagellation, just a quiet reset, like straightening a picture frame before the whole wall feels crooked. History offers a striking example in Cato the Younger, known for his ironclad discipline. When a dinner guest mocked his simple meal of bread and water, Cato didn't lecture or justify. He simply said, I find I enjoy hunger more when I choose it than when it's forced upon me. That's the 10-second rule in action, a swift recalibration of perspective that transforms deprivation into empowerment. Modern psychology confirms this. The brain's neuroplasticity means every small, conscious choice strengthens alternative pathways, making the next correction slightly easier. So where can you apply this today? Maybe it's the moment your tone turns sharp in a conversation, and you catch yourself mid-sentence. Perhaps it's when you mindlessly grab your phone during a creative block, then pause before the scroll hijacks your focus. Epictetus' rudder doesn't demand perfection, just awareness in those critical seconds where momentum shifts. Try this now. Think of one recent slip, a procrastinated task, an unnecessary purchase, a harsh word spoken. Replay it until you pinpoint that fleeting moment where a different choice was possible. That's your 10-second window. Then ask Seneca's question, what tiny adjustment would realign me with my best self? Not tomorrow, not after some arbitrary fresh start, right now. Because resilience isn't built in grand declarations, but in these almost invisible acts of course correction. Each one is a whisper to your future self. You're closer than you think. Epictetus once told his students, it is impossible to learn that which you think you already know. This simple truth captures the Stoic art of lifelong learning, not as passive accumulation of facts, but as an active posture of humility and wonder. The resilient mind isn't one that's rigid with certainty, but fluid with curiosity, always willing to ask, what if I'm missing something? Consider how children approach the world. Every puddle is an ocean to explore, every stranger a potential teacher. The Stoics argued we don't lose this capacity with age, we bury it under layers of pride and the illusion of expertise. Take two professionals faced with industry disruption. One clings to outdated methods, insisting, this is how we've always done it. The other approaches each change with a learner's stance, asking, what can this teach me? The difference in outcomes isn't just about skills, it's about adaptability. Marcus Aurelius modeled this as emperor, studying philosophy under Junius Rusticus well into his reign. While lesser rulers might have dismissed new ideas as threats to their authority, Marcus wrote in his journal, to stop learning is to start decaying. Resilience isn't about being unshakable, it's about being willing to be reshaped. Here's where modern life tests us. We're surrounded by platforms that reward performative certainty, social media hot takes, political absolutism, workplace posturing. But the Stoics practiced something radical, intellectual vulnerability. Seneca deliberately attended lectures by philosophers he disagreed with, not to debate them, but to mine for overlooked truths. The wise man, he wrote, has no less need of ears than tongue. This isn't about aimless openness, it's strategic humility. When you assume you might be wrong, you create space to grow stronger. Try this exercise today. Identify one area where you've grown complacent, maybe a long-held opinion, a routine at work, or even a relationship dynamic. Approach it with what Zen Buddhists call Shoshin, the beginner's mind. Ask one genuine question about it, free from the need to defend or conclude. Why do I believe this? What would someone seeing this for the first time notice? Epictetus framed this as polishing the mirror of perception. The clearer your self-awareness, the more accurately you navigate challenges. History offers a vivid example in Socrates, whom the Stoics deeply admired. His famous declaration, "I know that I know nothing," wasn't feigned modesty. It was the engine of his wisdom. By relentlessly questioning assumptions, his own and others, he built intellectual resilience that outlasted persecution and even death sentences. Modern research validates this. Studies on cognitive flexibility show that people who regularly engage with opposing viewpoints develop greater creativity and problem-solving stamina. So here's your challenge. Before sunset today, ask one question that unsettles your certainty, not to undermine your confidence but to expand it. What if my competitor's approach has merit? Could my parenting style benefit from an update? What outdated belief am I clinging to? Like a tree that bends in wind but doesn't break, the learner's stance lets you sway without snapping. Because true resilience isn't about standing immovable, it's about knowing when to lean into the wind and let it teach you. Seneca once wrote a letter to his friend Lucilius with a striking confession. "I have learned to say no, and that single syllable has added years to my life." Not decades of extra time, but the quality of moments reclaimed from trivial obligations. The Stoics understood what modern neuroscience confirms. Every yes you give to something unimportant is a silent no to something essential. Marcus Aurelius framed this as the discipline of exclusion. If you seek tranquility, do less. Not just any less, only what aligns with your purpose. The rest are distractions wearing the costume of duty. Think of your energy as a finite currency. Each harmless maybe to a mediocre dinner invitation, each reluctant sure to an unnecessary meeting, each passive agreement to gossip. These withdrawals seem insignificant until you check your balance and find your resilience bankrupt. The modern workplace offers a perfect example. That recurring status meeting where only 2 agenda items concern you. The average person attends out of vague obligation, zoning out while their mental resources drain. The resilient person respectfully declines, offering to review minutes for relevant sections. This isn't rudeness, it's stewardship. As Seneca noted, no person hands out their money to passers-by, yet most distribute their time indiscriminately. History provides a telling case study in Cato the Younger. Known for his unshakable principles, he once walked out of a Senate session when debate strayed from core issues. His colleagues called it extreme, he called it integrity. The Stoics recognized that the muscle behind every meaningful yes is strengthened by countless no's, not from negativity, but from clarity. Your ability to decline harmless but hollow requests determines your capacity to fully engage with what matters. Try this audit today. Scan your calendar for the next 7 days. Highlight one commitment that sparks neither joy nor growth. perhaps a social event you're attending out of guilt, or a committee role that's become habitual. Now hear Epictetus whispering, "Is this essential to your peace or progress? If not, craft a polite exit. Use Seneca's template, brief gratitude followed by firm boundary." I appreciate the invitation, but I need to focus on other priorities right now. No excuses, no over-explaining. The modern world will always spin more plates than you can keep airborne. Resilience comes not from juggling them all, but from carefully selecting which ones deserve your hands. Tonight, ask yourself, what seemingly harmless no have I been postponing? That unused gym membership draining your account, the group chat that fuels more anxiety than connection. Each unattended no isn't just a missed refusal, it's a forfeited chance to say yes to something richer. As Marcus wrote in his journal, the more we leave undone, the more we actually do when our actions are chosen rather than accumulated. Your time isn't just money. It's the raw material of your legacy. Spend it with the precision of a Stoic sculptor, chiseling away everything that isn't essential to reveal the masterpiece beneath. The menu sits heavy in your hands, 12 pages of options, each dish described like a work of art. The waiter's pen hovers as your stomach knots. What if you choose wrong? What if the steak is overcooked or the pasta too rich? Meanwhile, the Stoic at the next table has already ordered, savoring their first bite while you're still dissecting truffle oil percentages. This isn't just indecision, it's a theft of your own time and peace. The Stoics called it analysis paralysis, and Epictetus cut through it with characteristic bluntness. If you wait for perfect conditions, you'll never begin. Better to stumble forward than stand still in fear of falling. Imagine two architects sketching plans. One obsesses over every line, terrified of flaws, while the other drafts a functional blueprint and revises as they build. Both face the same uncertainties, but only one is creating something real. That's the essence of the good enough decision, not settling for mediocrity, but recognizing that most choices are reversible and nearly all are survivable. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire with this mindset, scribbling in his journal, "The cucumber is bitter, throw it away, there are brambles in your path." Go around, that's all you need to know. No agonizing, no existential crises, just pragmatic adjustments mid-stride. Take modern career choices. The average graduate spends months deliberating between job offers, terrified of picking the wrong path. But the Stoic asks, what's the worst that could happen? You'll gain skills, meet mentors, or discover what you truly want through experience rather than speculation. Even failed ventures become data points for your next move. Seneca, who switched careers from politics to philosophy after exile, wrote, "No wind favors the sailor who knows not which port they seek." Sometimes you only find your direction by sailing. Here's where the magic lies. Every good enough choice isn't just a step forward, it's a deposit in your confidence bank. Like a muscle strengthening with use, your decision-making resilience grows each time you trust yourself to handle outcomes, imperfect as they may be. The restaurant patron who orders decisively today is the same person who'll trust their instincts during a crisis tomorrow. So where's your overgrown menu? That project you've stalled for more research, the relationship conversation you're not ready to have, Epictetus offers a liberating question. What's the minimum viable action here? Not the perfect solution, just the next right step, because resilience isn't birthed in flawless plans, but in the willingness to course correct as you go. The Stoics didn't wait for storms to pass, they learned to sail in rough waters, and so can you, one good enough choice at a time. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that every argument has at least three sides, your perspective, theirs, and the truth that likely lies somewhere between. This third story technique wasn't about compromising principles. It was about widening the lens to reduce the heat of conflict. Seneca took it further, advising his students to step into the river of another's thoughts before judging their footing. What sounds like obvious advice becomes radical when applied. Most disputes aren't battles between right and wrong, but collisions of incomplete viewpoints scrambling for dominance. Picture this: you're cut off in traffic by a speeding sedan. Instinct paints the driver as reckless, selfish, even malicious, but the third story asks you to consider the invisible context. Maybe they're rushing to the hospital, or their child just called from a broken-down car. Perhaps they didn't see you, or they're having the worst day of their career. None of these excuses endangerment, but each one softens the edges of your anger. The Stoics called this sympatheia, the practice of seeing others as flawed humans like yourself, not villains in your personal narrative. History offers a striking example in Alexander the Great's encounter with the philosopher Diogenes. When Alexander found him sunbathing naked in a barrel, most expected the king to punish the insolence. Instead, Alexander famously said, "If I were not Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes." That's the third story in action, the ability to admire what you don't fully understand. Modern psychology confirms this approach. Couples who practice perspective-taking during arguments resolve conflicts faster and report higher relationship satisfaction. The facts don't change, but the emotional stakes shrink when you recognize that every antagonist is the hero of their own story. Try this exercise next time tension arises. Pause and sketch 3 versions of the conflict: yours, theirs, and a neutral observer's. The coworker who snapped at you might be grappling with a parent's illness. The rude cashier could be working a double shift to cover rent. Even in deeper betrayals, the third story isn't about excusing harm, it's about draining its power to define you. As Marcus wrote, the best revenge is to not be like your enemy. So here's your challenge: recall a recent friction point, a family disagreement, a professional slight. Now imagine explaining it to a Martian who's never met either of you. What details would they notice that you've overlooked? That's the space where resilience grows, not in the absence of conflict, but in the ability to hold multiple truths at once. Because the unshakable mind isn't one that never feels anger, but one that asks before reacting, "What's the story I'm not seeing?" Epictetus once watched a student agonize over starting a massive writing project, paralyzed by its scale. His advice was disarmingly simple: begin where you are, use what you have, do what you can. This wasn't just encouragement, it was psychological strategy. The Stoics recognized what modern behavioral science confirms: resistance crumbles not through grand gestures, but through microscopic starts. That unfinished report, the cluttered garage, the difficult conversation you've postponed, they don't require Herculean effort to begin, just 5 minutes of focused attention. Marcus Aurelius captured this perfectly in his private writings. The mountain you've been dreading is just a collection of pebbles. Carry them one at a time. Think about how physical objects behave. At rest, they resist movement initially, but once in motion, they gain momentum. Your mind works the same way. The hardest part of any task isn't the doing, it's the starting. That's why the 5-minute rule works like mental judo. By committing to such a laughably small increment, you bypass the brain's resistance mechanisms. You're not running a marathon, you're just tying your shoes. Consider the student facing a blank thesis document. Staring at the blinking cursor feels like standing at the base of Everest. But when she sets a timer for 5 minutes and types whatever comes to mind, no editing, no perfection, something shifts. The ice cracks. Those 5 minutes often stretch to 15, then 30. Even if they don't, she's moved the needle. As Seneca observed, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. Here's where this gets practical. Pick one avoidance task right now, something that's been weighing on you but feels overwhelming. Maybe it's sorting tax documents, drafting an uncomfortable email, or starting an exercise routine. Set a timer for 5 minutes and begin, not with the pressure to finish, but with the freedom to stop when the bell rings. You'll discover one of two outcomes. Either you'll find the momentum to continue, most common, or you'll have 5 fewer minutes of work remaining, still a win. The ancient Stoics didn't have productivity apps or motivational podcasts. They had something better, an understanding of human nature. Resistance hasn't changed in 2,000 years. Neither has the solution. Small, consistent starts that prove to your subconscious that the monster under the bed was just a shadow. So ask yourself this: what's one pebble you can carry today? Not the whole mountain, just one small stone, because resilience isn't built in heroic leaps, but in the quiet accumulation of tiny, courageous starts. Rain pelts against your window as your picnic plans dissolve. But what if this inconvenience held hidden gifts? The Stoics practiced something radical called reverse gratitude, where they actively thanked life for its obstacles. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius during exile, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." This wasn't empty optimism, it was tactical resilience building. By training himself to spot value in setbacks, Seneca transformed his banishment into a creative rebirth, producing some of history's greatest philosophical letters from that rocky island. Think of anti-fragility, the concept that some systems don't just endure stress but thrive because of it. Your bones grow denser under weight, your muscles tear to rebuild stronger. The Stoics recognized the mind operates the same way. Every delayed flight that teaches patience, every critical comment that sharpens your clarity, every failure that reveals a flawed assumption, these aren't just hurdles. They're resistance training for your character. Marcus Aurelius captured this in his journal. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Take that rainy day, the average person sighs at cancelled plans. The Stoic asks, what unexpected opportunities emerge? An afternoon to finally read that book. A chance to practice cooking that new recipe. Even the simple gift of watching storms roll in with undivided attention. This reframe isn't about denying disappointment, it's about expanding your vision to see the full spectrum of experience. Here's the profound twist. When you start interrogating challenges for their hidden curriculum, you stop fearing them. A missed promotion becomes a nudge toward entrepreneurship. A breakup carves space for self-discovery. Seneca called this the art of alchemy, transforming leaden moments into golden wisdom. Modern psychology confirms it. People who practice cognitive reappraisal, the clinical term for reframing, show greater emotional resilience during crises. So try this tonight. Reflect on one current frustration, a work obstacle, a financial pinch, a relational tension. Ask Seneca's question, how might this be secretly strengthening me? Not in some vague future sense, but right now. That stressful project, it's honing your problem solving under pressure. The tight budget, teaching resourcefulness. Even loneliness can be the forge where self-reliance is tempered. The Stoics didn't wait for hindsight to appreciate life's curveballs. They trained themselves to spot the gifts in real time, not as silver linings around dark clouds, but as the very rain that makes their roots grow deeper. Your toughest challenge today isn't just something to endure. It's the universe's way of asking, how much stronger do you want to become? Marcus Aurelius began his mornings with a ritual modern minds might find radical. He wrote in his journal with one singular focus, often repeating the same phrase for pages, not out of obsession, but to train his attention like a laser beam. Concentrate every minute, he scribbled, like a Roman, like a human being, on doing what's in front of you with precise and genuine seriousness. This wasn't just productivity advice. It was mental armor against the chaos of an empire. The Stoics didn't just preach monotasking, they treated it as a spiritual discipline, a way to reclaim sovereignty over a mind besieged by distractions centuries before smartphones existed. Epictetus took it further, comparing focus to holding a fragile cup of water while walking through a bustling market. If you fix your gaze entirely on the cup, he taught, not a drop will spill, no matter how crowded the street. But glance at the juggler, the shouting merchant, or the passing chariot, and you'll lose what you carry. His point wasn't about hydration, it was about the cost of divided attention. Every mental shift, from a work project to a notification to a wandering thought, is like setting down that cup. And here's what modern neuroscience confirms. The average person takes 23 minutes to fully refocus after an interruption. That's not just lost time, it's eroded resilience. Consider how differently two people might eat lunch. One scrolls through emails between bites, half watches a news ticker, and mentally rehearses an afternoon meeting. The other, practicing Stoic monotasking, sets their phone aside, notices the crunch of vegetables, the tang of dressing, the warmth of sunlight through the window. Both consume identical calories, but only one leaves the table nourished in body and mind. This is the paradox the Stoics uncovered. What we call multitasking is often just rapid exhaustion, depleting our capacity to handle real challenges. Here's where monotasking becomes transformative. When Marcus wrote the same principle repeatedly in his journal, he wasn't being redundant. He was building neural pathways for sustained attention. Like a muscle straining under weight, the mind grows stronger through resistance to distraction. Modern research echoes this. MRI scans show that people who regularly practice focused activities, whether meditation, deep reading, or even mindful dishwashing, develop thicker gray matter in the prefrontal cortex, the brain's command center for self-regulation. So here's a challenge drawn directly from Stoic practice. Tonight, choose one meal to eat without screens, books, or conversation, just you and the food. When your mind wanders, and it will gently return to the flavors, textures, and aromas, Epictetus would call this owning the moment, not as a passive consumer, but as an active participant in your own experience. At first, it might feel unsettling, even boring. That's the point. Boredom is the friction where attention is forged. Now ask yourself, what single task today deserves your Marcus Aurelius focus? Not the flashiest item on your to-do list, but the one that, if given undivided attention, would change everything. Maybe it's that strategic plan you've been skimming, the child's bedtime story you usually rush through, or the creative project nibbled at in stolen moments. The Stoics knew something we often forget. Depth isn't measured in hours spent, but in attention invested. A single fully present conversation can build more trust than a dozen distracted ones. 15 minutes of absorbed writing can yield more insight than a day of fragmented effort. History offers a quiet testament to this power. Seneca famously wrote his letters in concentrated bursts, often while others napped or feasted. I divorce myself from the crowd, he explained, for only then can I truly join humanity. That's the ultimate paradox of monotasking. By narrowing your focus, you expand your impact. Because resilience isn't about how much you can juggle at once, it's about how deeply you can commit to what matters before the next storm hits. So put down the cup. Watch the water still and notice how much further it carries you when you stop spilling it along the way. Seneca once wrote a letter describing an elderly man planting olive trees, knowing he'd never sit in their shade. When questioned why he bothered, the man replied simply, "I was born into a world others prepared. Let me do the same for those who follow." This vignette captures the Stoic future self-lens, the practice of measuring daily choices not by their immediate payoff, but by their ripple effects across time. Marcus Aurelius framed it as a question: what's left of you when all your temporary roles, emperor, father, soldier, are stripped away? The answer lies in the invisible seeds you plant today, long before their fruit appears. Consider how compounding works in nature. A single acorn seems insignificant until centuries later, when its towering oak provides shelter for generations. Your habits operate the same way. That 15-minute morning walk you consistently take, in 5 years, it could mean the difference between climbing stairs with ease or relying on medication. The patience you show your toddler during tantrums, decades later, it resurfaces as their emotional resilience during life's storms. The Stoics called this symphonia, the harmonious alignment between present actions and future consequences. Take something as mundane as bedtime. Hitting snooze on your alarm feels harmless in the moment, but stack those lost mornings over a year, and you've forfeited hundreds of potential hours for learning, creating, or simply grounding yourself before the day's chaos. Seneca warned about this erosion of time in his letters. We're tight-fisted with money but reckless with time, the one resource we can never replenish. Modern research confirms his observation. People who consistently wake just 1 hour earlier report higher life satisfaction, not because mornings are magical, but because the cumulative effect of reclaimed time reshapes their lives. Here's where the future self lens becomes transformative. When facing a choice whether to scroll social media or read, to vent frustration or pause, to spend impulsively or invest, imagine your 80-year-old self observing. What would they urge you to cherish? What would they beg you to release? Epictetus offered a litmus test. If you wouldn't want your child to mimic this behavior, why tolerate it in yourself? Every small decision is a brushstroke in the portrait your future self will live within. So try this tonight. Before sleep, ask Seneca's question: what tree am I planting today that I may never sit under? Maybe it's choosing water over wine to preserve tomorrow's clarity. Perhaps it's writing that letter of appreciation instead of assuming there's always tomorrow. Even the act of turning off screens an hour early, though its benefits seem distant, compounds into seasons of deeper rest and sharper mornings. The Stoics didn't wait for old age to gain wisdom. They cultivated it daily, knowing each choice was a whispered conversation across time. Your future self is listening. What will they thank you for when they replay today's tape? Epictetus watched a student stumble through an elaborate excuse for being late to class and offered a razor-sharp correction. Must you narrate your life to every passerby? A tree doesn't apologize for its roots, it simply grows. This was the birth of the no explanation test, a Stoic litmus for when words strengthen your position and when they dilute it. The resilient mind understands that not every opinion requires defense, not every decision merits debate. Your quiet confidence becomes the unshakable ground from which all else grows. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily in the swirl of imperial politics. While lesser leaders sought validation through grand speeches, he wrote in his journal, "The cucumber is bitter. Throw it away, no need to announce why." This wasn't indifference, it was the profound understanding that over-explaining often signals insecurity rather than clarity. Modern psychology confirms this. People who habitually justify their choices display higher cortisol levels, as if each unprompted explanation were a tiny surrender of sovereignty. Imagine this scenario: you decline a dinner invitation with a simple, "I won't be able to make it." The host presses, "Why not?" And here's the fork in the road. Most people reflexively fabricate an excuse, work deadlines, fictitious prior commitments, but the Stoic responds with warm finality. "It just doesn't work for me this time." No drama, no deception, just a boundary wrapped in kindness. Notice what happens next. Either the asker accepts your response, revealing their respect, or they escalate, revealing their disregard. Both outcomes provide valuable data about the relationship, data you'd miss if you'd camouflaged your truth with unnecessary details. The no explanation test shines brightest in professional settings. That colleague who questions your methodology in a meeting, the instinct is to launch into a point-by-point defense. But resilience whispers another option. I've considered the alternatives, and this is the approach I'm taking. Period. Not arrogant, not defensive, simply anchored. Epictetus trained his students to distinguish between helpful clarification and compulsive self-justification. Does the audience require this information to understand, or does my ego require it to feel approved? So where does your over-explaining lie? In the apologies peppered throughout emails, the backstory you give when ordering salad instead of pasta, the 5-paragraph text you draft to decline a weekend plan. Each unnecessary justification is a small crack in your foundation. Tonight, try an experiment. For one interaction, whether with a barrister or a board member, offer a decision without garnish. Notice the liberation when you realize most people weren't demanding an explanation. You were preemptively supplying one. As Marcus wrote, you owe no accounts at life's dinner table, only the willingness to eat what nourishes you and leave what doesn't. The strongest trees stand without commentary, so can you. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who was exiled for his principles, insisted that philosophy wasn't just about lofty ideas, it was measured in small acts of service. How can we call ourselves virtuous, he asked, if our goodness never leaves the realm of thought? The Stoics believed kindness was a muscle that atrophied without daily use, not through grand gestures, but through what Rufus called the unnoticed stitches that hold society together. That's the essence of the small service ritual, transforming ordinary moments into microdoses of purpose by asking one simple question: who could use what I can spare? Picture this: you're rushing through a crowded subway station, late for a meeting, when you spot a tourist squinting at a map. The average person walks past, caught in their own urgency. The Stoic pauses just long enough to point the way, not because it's heroic, but because they've trained themselves to see such moments as spiritual calisthenics. Marcus Aurelius described these opportunities as the universe's way of reminding us we're never too important to be kind. Modern research validates this ancient wisdom. People who perform daily micro-kindnesses report higher levels of life satisfaction than those waiting for occasional grand philanthropic opportunities. The psychological payoff isn't in scale, it's in consistency. Consider the physics of momentum. A single push won't keep a boulder rolling, but repeated small forces maintain motion indefinitely. Your kindness operates the same way. The coffee you buy for the exhausted nurse behind you, the genuine compliment you give the barrister, the neighbor's trash bin you wheel back from the curb unprompted. Individually, they're barely noticeable. Collectively, they reshape your neural pathways to scan for opportunities rather than obstacles. Epictetus framed this as the discipline of attention, training yourself to notice where your surplus time, energy, even a smile might bridge someone else's deficit. Here's the profound twist the Stoics uncovered. These rituals don't just help others, they fortify you. When Seneca advised wealthy Romans to anonymously pay school fees for strangers' children, he wasn't just advocating charity. He was prescribing an antidote to existential drift. Nothing so relieves the weight of our own troubles, he wrote, as lightening another's load. Neuroscientists now recognize this phenomenon. Altruistic acts trigger the same dopamine pathways as personal achievements, but with lasting effects. That fleeting high from buying yourself something new fades quickly. The warmth from helping a stranger carry groceries lingers, so try this today. Don't wait for disaster relief funds or volunteer vacations. Start microscopic. Hold the elevator door for someone shuffling with packages. Leave a book you've finished on a park bench with a note for the next reader. Text a friend one specific thing you admire about them. These aren't just nice gestures, they're resistance training for your moral core. The Stoics knew what modern science confirms. Resilience isn't just how you withstand life's blows, but how often you remind yourself, through action, that you're part of something larger. As you walk through your neighborhood tonight, notice the uncelebrated kindnesses already weaving through daily life. The teenager helping a stray dog, the cashier patiently explaining coupons to an elderly man, the parent calming a tantruming child without harshness. These are Rufus's unnoticed stitches in action. Now ask yourself, where's your thread in today's tapestry? Because purpose isn't found in waiting for center stage. It's crafted in the quiet wings, through small services that whisper, I see you. We belong to each other. Marcus Aurelius kept a private journal where he didn't just vent emotions, he named them with surgical precision. The pain in my chest isn't chaos, he'd write, it's grief for Lucius. The heat in my temples isn't fire, it's impotent rage at the Senate's short-sightedness. This practice of emotional labeling wasn't mere diary keeping, it was a psychological tool sharper than any Roman gladius. Modern neuroscience confirms what the Stoics intuited. When you attach specific words to turbulent feelings, you activate the prefrontal cortex, the brain's rational control center, which dials down the amygdala's alarm bells by up to 30%. It's not about suppressing emotions, it's about shining a light into the storm until the shadows lose their power. Epictetus took this further with his famous observer's stance. Say to every harsh impression, you are just an impression, not the thing you pretend to be. Picture a child terrified of a shadowy coat rack in their bedroom. The moment a parent names it, that's just grandpa's old hat and cane. The monster dissolves into mundane objects. Your emotions work the same way. That simmering irritation after a team meeting isn't just stress. It might be frustration at being interrupted, or disappointment in unprepared colleagues. The more precise the label, the less control the feeling holds over you. Take a modern example. You're stuck in traffic, late for an appointment. Your grip tightens on the wheel, your jaw clenches, classic anger, right? But what if you pause to dissect it further? Underneath the surface bubbles helplessness, the inability to change the situation, anxiety about others' perceptions of your lateness, and perhaps even shame for not leaving earlier. Labeling these layers does something remarkable. It transforms a vague, overwhelming wave into manageable currents you can navigate one by one. Here's how to practice this today. When a strong emotion arises, press pause. Ask Epictetus' question. What exactly is visiting me right now? Not, I'm angry, but I'm feeling dismissed because my contribution was overlooked. Not, I'm stressed, but I'm carrying anticipatory dread about tomorrow's presentation. This isn't semantics, it's emotional cartography, mapping the terrain of your inner world so you don't get lost in its storms. The Stoics believed that naming an emotion was the first step in taming it. Like a scribe cataloging artifacts in a vast imperial warehouse, you're not responsible for what arrives at your mind's gates, only for how you document and store it. So next time frustration flares, don't just feel it, define it. Call it by its true name and watch as its grip loosens, leaving you freer to choose your next move with clarity rather than chaos. Seneca once wrote that wealth isn't measured by what fills your coffers, but by what fills your awareness. He described walking past lavish villas and thinking not of their grandeur, but of the sleepless nights their owners spent guarding them. The Stoics practiced something radical called asset counting, not tallying gold coins, but cataloging the invisible abundance already woven into their days. Marcus Aurelius began his mornings listing the gifts of the gods: functioning limbs, clean water, the ability to reason. This wasn't naive optimism, it was tactical resilience building. When you inventory your resources, both obvious and overlooked, you shift from scarcity to security, realizing you're richer than your fears let you believe. Think of how differently two people might experience a power outage. One fixates on the dead refrigerator, the spoiled food, the inconvenience. The other notices the candlelight softening faces at the dinner table, the unplanned conversation replacing screen time, the reminder of how much they rely on invisible systems. Both face the same circumstance, but only one has trained their mind to spot hidden assets. Epictetus called this seeing with philosopher's eyes, recognizing that every loss reveals a dependency you didn't know you had, and every dependency, when acknowledged, becomes a newfound source of gratitude. Try this exercise tonight. Grab any scrap of paper and list 3 advantages you've been taking for granted. Maybe it's the neighborhood library card gathering dust in your wallet, the friend who always returns your texts promptly, or the fact that your joints don't ache when you climb stairs. Seneca argued that true wealth lies in wanting what you already possess, and modern psychology agrees. People who regularly inventory their non-material assets, skills, relationships, even simple conveniences, show higher resilience during crises because their sense of security isn't tied to external fluctuations. Here's where this practice transforms from reflection to strategy. That rainy day fund you've been meaning to start, you likely have more starter resources than you think. An hour a week to freelance, unused gift cards that could cover a month's coffee budget, or marketable hobbies collecting digital dust. The parent feeling overwhelmed forgets they've already mastered patience in traffic, negotiation with toddlers, and finding creativity in boredom, all transferable skills. Asset counting isn't about denying lack, it's about recognizing unused potential. So ask yourself tonight as you lock the door or brush your teeth, what abundance are you ignoring? Not just the roof over your head, but the knowledge that you've navigated every hard day so far. Not just the job that pays bills, but the problem-solving muscles it's strengthened without you noticing. The Stoics knew what modern science confirms. Resilience isn't about having unlimited resources, it's about fully deploying the ones already in your hands. Your real net worth isn't in your bank statement. It's in the inventory you've been too busy to take. Epictetus taught his students a meditation that might seem strange at first. He called it the observer stance. Picture yourself sitting on a riverbank watching leaves float by. Now imagine each leaf is one of your thoughts, worries about work, frustrations with people, fears about the future. The practice isn't to stop the leaves or change their course, but simply to notice them passing without jumping in to chase them. You are not your thoughts, he'd say, any more than the sky belongs to the clouds that cross it. This mental shift from being swept away by your thinking to witnessing it with calm curiosity is where true resilience takes root. Marcus Aurelius expanded on this with his concept of the inner citadel, a mental fortress untouched by external chaos. He wrote, "The mind adapts and converts to its own purposes the obstacle to our acting. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." In other words, when you stop identifying with every passing thought or emotion, you reclaim sovereignty over your inner world. A stressful situation might trigger the thought, "This is unbearable," but the observer stance lets you add, "And that's just a sentence my mind constructed, not an absolute truth." Consider a modern example. You're about to give a presentation and your heart races as the thought arises, "I'll embarrass myself." Most people either suppress the fear or let it derail them. But the Stoic approach is different. First, you name the thought without judgment. There's the familiar pre-performance anxiety. Then you create space around it. This is my body's ancient wiring trying to protect me, not a prediction of the future. Finally, you choose your response. I'll acknowledge this sensation, then focus on delivering value to the audience. This isn't denial, it's discernment, separating the signal from the noise. Try this today. The next time a stressful thought arises, maybe my partner doesn't appreciate me, or I'll never get ahead at work, pause and ask epictetus question. Can I watch this thought like a cloud passing across the sky of my awareness? Notice what happens. The thought might still exist, but its gravitational pull weakens. You're no longer drowning in the river of your mind. You're sitting safely on the shore, observing the current without being swept away. The Stoics weren't advocating emotional suppression. They were teaching emotional literacy, the ability to read your inner landscape without being consumed by it. Like a scientist calmly noting data points, you can register frustration without becoming frustration, feel fear without being defined by it. This witness stance transforms resilience from a battle against your own mind into a gentle act of self-possession. The storm might rage, but the sky behind it remains untouched, and so do you. The moment your meticulously planned day starts unraveling, the flight gets cancelled, the client reschedules, the Wi-Fi crashes before your big presentation. That's when the Stoic alternative path mindset becomes your secret weapon. Seneca, who weathered political exile and Nero's tyranny, wrote, "No wind favors the sailor who knows not which port to seek." But here's what most miss. His wisdom wasn't just about having a destination. It was about cultivating the flexibility to dock at unexpected harbors and still find treasure. Resilience isn't rigid adherence to Plan A. It's the quiet confidence to pivot to Plan B, C, or even D without collapsing into frustration. Picture two travelers stranded at an airport. One obsesses over the original itinerary, refreshing the airline app every 30 seconds, as if sheer willpower could melt the storm clouds. The other pulls out a notebook and sketches 3 alternative routes. Maybe a train leaves in 2 hours, or the delay allows them to finally visit that museum near the terminal. Both face the same disruption, but only one has internalized Seneca's advice. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. The anxious mind treats detours as threats. The resilient mind greets them as uncharted shortcuts. This isn't just philosophical poetry, it's cognitive science. Studies on mental contrasting show that people who visualize both their goals and potential obstacles achieve better outcomes than those who fixate solely on success. The Stoics were pioneers of this technique. They'd rehearse not just their ideal day, but also its potential derailments, not to dwell on failure, but to normalize adaptability. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action," he was highlighting a paradoxical truth. Barriers often reveal paths you'd never have noticed on an unobstructed road. So try this today. Pick your most important task. Maybe it's finishing a project or having a crucial conversation. Now, before diving in, spend 60 seconds brainstorming alternatives. If your meeting gets cancelled, could you distill your points into an impactful email? If the gym's closed, what bodyweight exercises could you do in your living room? Epictetus trained his students to ask, what if the opposite happens? Not to breed pessimism, but to sharpen creative problem solving. The goal isn't to anticipate every curveball, it's to trust your ability to swing at whatever comes. History offers a masterclass in this mindset with the Roman general Fabius Maximus. Facing Hannibal's undefeated army, he abandoned traditional warfare, opting instead to harass supply lines and avoid direct combat. Critics called him cowardly, but his alternative path slowly drained Hannibal's resources, proving that sometimes the longest detour is the shortest way home. Your life won't demand guerrilla tactics against Carthaginians, but it will test your willingness to reroute. Here's the subtle shift that changes everything. Stop calling it Plan B. Language matters. Labeling something backup implies it's inferior, a consolation prize. The Stoics reframed alternatives as parallel opportunities, different flavors of success, not watered-down versions. That cancelled conference becomes time to refine your proposal. The rained-out picnic morphs into an impromptu living room fort with your kids. Seneca's Exile birthed his greatest letters. Your disrupted plans might birth unexpected breakthroughs. Tonight, reflect on one recent plan that crumbled. Not to judge your frustration, that's natural, but to mine it for hidden pivots. Where did you tunnel vision on the original script? What unexpected door might have opened if you'd stopped banging on the locked one? The Stoics didn't just tolerate change, they courted it, knowing flexibility is the muscle that makes resilience possible. So tomorrow, when life inevitably swerves, you won't white-knuckle the wheel. You'll simply turn the car toward new scenery, curious about what waits beyond the detour sign. Marcus Aurelius spent his final days writing letters not of conquests or imperial decrees, but of quiet reflections on the broom left leaning against a wall, wondering if the servant who placed it there did so with care, if the cook who prepared his meals took pride in their craft. In his private journals, he circled this truth. Legacy isn't built in grand final acts, but in the unnoticed moments where we choose integrity over convenience. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be, he wrote. Be one, not in some distant future of achieved perfection, but here, now, in how you handle the unobserved details. Epictetus took this further with his metaphor of the mustard seed. Character grows not in the rare display of heroism, but in the daily repetition of tiny honesties. The shopkeeper who points out when you've underpaid, the colleague who credits your idea in a meeting despite no one noticing the omission. Even something as simple as returning excess change when the cashier miscalculates. These are the silent bricks of legacy. Modern research confirms this. Studies on moral identity show that people who consistently act with integrity in small ways are far more likely to behave ethically under pressure. It's not about willpower in the moment. It's about the self-image you've constructed through countless micro-choices. Consider the ancient story of Diogenes carrying a lantern in broad daylight, claiming to search for an honest man. The theatrical stunt wasn't just satire, it highlighted how rare consistency had become. The Stoics argued that true integrity isn't performative, it's the alignment between your private and public self. When no one's watching, do you still pick up the litter? Do you still admit the mistake no one caught? Marcus called this living as if the whole world sees, even when alone in your chamber. Here's the challenge that turns philosophy into action. Tonight, let one small moment reveal your character. Maybe it's correcting the barrister who gave you too much change, or resisting the urge to peek at a partner's private messages when their phone lights up. Epictetus promised, no one becomes honest by accident. These micro-actions are the training ground not for the legacy you hope to leave someday, but for the person you become through relentless repetition. Because in the end, your tombstone won't list the medals you earned or the deals you closed. It'll whisper what you practiced daily when no one applauded. Consider how a single raindrop seems insignificant until you witness the Grand Canyon. Those 40 micro-decisions you make each day, they're your raindrops, carving resilience into the bedrock of your character over time. The Stoics didn't stumble upon unshakable calm by accident. They built it brick by brick through the quiet repetition of choices that most overlook. Epictetus put it perfectly. No great thing is created suddenly, any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig. Let it first blossom, then bear fruit, then ripen. What you've just encountered aren't abstract ideals, but the very tools Roman emperors and enslaved philosophers used to thrive in chaos, tools now in your hands. At its core, Stoic resilience boils down to three threads woven through every decision: control, perspective, and discipline. Control isn't about commanding the world, but mastering your response to it, like choosing silence over sarcasm when provoked. Perspective is the lens that transforms obstacles into opportunities, as when Seneca reframed exile as creative solitude. And discipline, that's the daily grind of showing up, whether it's 5 minutes of journaling or resisting the third scroll through social media before bed. These aren't separate skills, but facets of the same gem. A soldier doesn't train his aim one day and his endurance the next. Every drill strengthens the whole warrior. You don't need to overhaul your life overnight. Start where you are. Pick 2 or 3 practices from these 40 that resonate most. Maybe the evening reflection, the third story technique for conflicts, or the 5-minute rule for procrastination. Consistency trumps quantity. Marcus Aurelius didn't wake up enlightened. He wrote reminders to himself daily, sometimes repeating the same phrase for pages until it sank in. Small actions compound. A single deep breath won't calm a lifetime of anxiety, but 1,000 breaths over months rewire your nervous system. Now, this isn't just theory, it's an invitation to experiment. Share your chosen practices in the comments. Did the view from above ease your work stress? Did labeling emotions diffuse an argument? Your insights might spark someone else's breakthrough, just as Epictetus students learn from each other's struggles. Resilience isn't a solo mission, it's a collective fire fed by shared sparks of courage and honesty. The Stoics left us a profound truth. You aren't just born resilient, you choose it moment by moment, in the whispers of your thoughts and the cadence of your actions. Not perfectly, but persistently, not without fear, but with the determination to act despite it. So take your first step today, however small. The path won't always be smooth, but each deliberate choice leaves a trail for others and for your future self to follow. As Seneca wrote in his final letter, where you arrive doesn't matter as much as the direction you set. Now begin, the rest will